Welcome to Rewiring the American Edge, the podcast where we explore the intersection of innovation, automation, and policy to ask one big question. What will it take for cities, industries, and people to thrive in a rapidly changing world? I'm Billy Riggs, urban planner, researcher, and technologist. And with my co-host, Vipul Vyas, we talk with global thinkers, policy leaders, entrepreneurs, and many more to explore how to build more competitive, inclusive, and resilient economies in the U.S. and around the world. Join us. Welcome, everybody, to Rewiring the American Edge, where we explore automation, innovation, and how policy is reshaping the future of work and life in America and around the world. I am Billy Riggs. I'm joined here by Vipul Vyas, my amazing co-host. Today, I have the honor of being joined by Parker Huncilman, and we're going to talk Midwestern manufacturing. And Parker also happens to be my brother-in-law, so we're keeping it all in the family. Really happy to have him as a family member and friend here. And Vipul joining us from sunny Palo Alto. I know you're eager to meet Parker and talk about this idea of Midwestern transition. Do you want to start us off just kind of asking Parker about himself?
I'm interested to hear what the future of manufacturing in the U.S. is, because it's definitely the topic du jour. I have some frustrations as well on that subject, so I'll talk about those in a minute.
I'll be interested to see if those align with mine.
Rewiring the American Edge is really something we started as professor types earlier this year, and we've been on a journey talking to people about how we can make American enterprise more competitive, but situating it in the global context. And what we've seen is there's a lot happening in the middle part of the US, but there's a lot of influences globally where we see competition and things happening that we need to be informed by. There's a lot of knowledge that we need to be aware of. And being from Middle America, I think it's important that people be aware of that, but also that we be prepared to learn, but also to be able to import and export knowledge and information. And so I think what we're talking about is being ready for the knowledge and the information future. And so we focus on this idea of the AI and the automation future. And that's what Vipul and I have really been and focused on. And everything I've talked to you about, Parker, in our social and personal lives has been about preparing your company for that future. And Vipul, I don't know, that's why we started this little podcast, which is a spinoff of a center that I started called the Autonomous Vehicles in the City Initiative. Vipul, I don't know if you want to add to that vision statement that I just put forward. We've got one really loyal listener, my mother, who you know very well, Parker. But Vipul, I don't know if you want to add to my little framing statement there.
No, I'd rather just hear from people who are in the trenches doing things.
There you go. Well, just a brief rundown of who I am, what I do, where I'm at in my career. So I'm a fifth generation managing partner and owner of Huncilman Sheet Metal Fabrication. We're a mid-sized fabricating company in the Midwestern region, just north of Louisville, Kentucky. Recently gone through a merger with a company called Nix Industrial, and I'll step back for a second. I'm the fifth generation to operate the business. So we started in '96, incorporated in 1913. So we've been in active business since then with the Huncilman family and the Nix family. So Nix Industrial is a family-owned company as well, run by two brothers, Adam and Matthew Nix. They're fifth generations to operate in their business as well, starting around the 1903 time frame. They are a like kind business. They bring out a lot of things to the table that we don't facilitate in house from a fabricating standpoint. So we fabricate sheet metal and build componentry for OEM manufacturers. And Nix Industrial platforms have everything to offer to the steel markets, from structural steel assemblies for buildings, heavier industrial platforms, build outs for innards of the building per se, We have high tolerance machining operations in Cincinnati and the Evansville market. Essentially, our headquarters now are out of Evansville, and we're a satellite location, which we call our Louisville facility. We operate around 70 employees at our facility, and we're just north of 200 company-wide now.
Hey, Parker, just for all the listeners that are around the world that are trying to put a pin on the map, can you explain where those cities are? Evansville, some people may not have heard of where that city is. So maybe
Yeah,
you could
so
put a pin on the map for this.
sure. Louisville, Kentucky, south central part of the Midwest. Rivertown, Evansville is much like Louisville, just on a much smaller scale. So it would be to the west, 2 hours from us, an hour and a half per se. So it has regional reach from a sales perspective. We could theoretically, they could sell out of Evansville to the Louisville market. So we're close in that nature.
Yeah, so for all of our European friends or our friends in Asia, that's if you're going on a map about 300 miles south of, or 600 kilometers south of Chicago, you take four steps south of Chicago and 2 steps west of that, and you might end up somewhere
Yeah.
near Evansville.
Yeah, call us right of center. How about that?
Yeah. I think there was a Daniel Day-Lewis quote somewhere near there in Last of the Mohicans, but somewhere about Kentucky, going west to Kentucky, or and then somewhere east of St. Louis. But we'll leave it at that. Don't want to get all James Fenimore Cooper on you. But I think this is, if we were to kind of distill this back to what we talk about as a part of this, we talk a lot about the geography of innovation. And I think, what I just heard from you was a little bit about the history of how Huncilman has really been about, I'll just call it 150 years of having an innovative business. And what Vipul and I have continually talked about is we're here situated in what people call or have referred to as one of the continual innovation centers of the US. But I think what we see is with AI and with kind of new forms of automation, there's an opportunity to innovate other places. And we're seeing new innovation clusters emerge with a different DNA that may not be about venture capital, and new opportunities to see startups arise with that can address real problems with materials, and that can be about making things. And I that's where I see you as a real maker. And Vipul, I don't know if you want to add to this, because we've really been talking about this idea of the resurgence of using technology to bring back building. And you've talked a little bit about the bringing back shipbuilding to the U.S. And I don't know if you want to remind
Well,
listeners about how you've talked about shipbuilding in the U.S.
Well, I'll tell it.
yeah,
This is an interesting aside on that matter. And when I got to know the Nix brothers, they took. We were a much larger business from when they were young. They're basically calling 3-4 years older than me, and Adam Nix is about my age. So they scaled their business enormously over the last 15-20 years. We were a much bigger platform when I started, which would have been at their age group. But they've since surpassed us in size, obviously through M&A activity. But one of the interesting stories was when they basically took the keys of their business from their dad as he retired. The first project that they bid was to build a yacht that a gentleman out of Evansville was going to put on the Ohio River. And it was this gigantic project that they had no clue that they could wrap their hands around, but they bid it and got the job. And essentially that was the kickoff for them to accelerate to where we are today, which, I mean, obviously that's not shipbuilding, but it was interesting because as fabricators, it just gives you scale of what we're capable of. But yeah, so as an aside, anyways, just tell me about your thoughts on what you're speaking to there.
yeah, and it's probably a little bit jumbled, but I think for me, there's a good bit of frustration. First of all, really on your point around VC funding and the ecosystem here in Northern California, the model has been rinse and repeat, exported everywhere else. It actually probably started more Route 128 in Boston, and then came here. And because there's more risk-taking appetite here culturally, I think it's a very cultural thing. It it really took off. But with vibe coding and AI, you don't need lots and lots of VC money to actually get a going concern up and running anymore, even in the software space. And I think that we're going to see a lot more. In fact, the threshold to raise money is much higher. You have to have essentially a business already running. And really, money's now capital is used to deploy, is used to scale, not test hypotheses as much as it used to be. Used to have a seed or a series A to see if something had any there. Now it's like, look, you can bootstrap that, and then the money's going to come in to hit the gas. On the manufacturing side, um, and Parker, I apologize, I'm going to speak more to what I see around here. Is
Sure.
is there's a lot of prototyping that happens here, but
Hmm.
ultimately the prototypes are then reduced to manufacturing at scale overseas. And my frustration is, I mean, then maybe that makes sense to some degree to do that, but I'm not sure. I'm not convinced of that because labor's not as, I mean, it's always going to be a significant input. There's no doubt about that. But with robotics and other manufacturing techniques, 3D printing to some extent, although I think that was overhyped, a lot of the stuff can be done here. And the barriers to getting stuff done here are not labor costs. It's actually expertise, a robust supply chain of all the little tiny components. I try to get some garment stuff, textile, which is like the most ancient type of manufacturing next to food. I mean, if you restaurants, a factory, if you will, too, but just getting things sewn, and that was a vibrant industry in LA. Not anymore. I mean, and even in New York for that matter, and the Southeast, but it just it's just completely dismantled. And I think to reconstitute that is going to be a conscious effort. I also see, and I'm not speaking to Parker here, but when I've tried to engage US manufacturers, there's just a little lack of hustle because many of them have their customers are kind of set. There's not a level of hunger that would make sense, that I would expect. And like I said, I'm speaking, would love to get Parker's thoughts on this, and I'll shut up here in a second. Is that I see a lot of the mom and pops who are more family owned businesses. Many of them are sort of just set. They're like, okay, I'm good. And then so they're like, I'll put in a request, and it'll take like weeks to get a response back. Versus something I sent to Southeast Asia will get like right away, and then they won't leave me alone. And so I noticed that. And then the other thing on the policy side, I'll close with this, is from California specifically, and we've talked about this, shipbuilding. The Navy wants to build ships, something bad. And not to make it too simple, but shipbuilding at scale is really putting up a piece of metal, welding it to another piece of metal, and doing that over and over again until you have a ship. And there has been no thirst to get that done. Philly secured a South Korean ship manufacturer to come and put a presence up, but nothing from the policymakers. Daniel Lurie, who's a mayor here in San Francisco, is constantly on social media and raving about even the smallest nail salon opening. Yet at the state level, Dee Dee Meyer, who's supposed to be doing the business or commercial policy for the state, I don't think I've seen a press release from her in the entire time she's been here. There is not, and if you talk about like the Mississippi of the West, the Central Valley is impoverished, probably, and
Yeah,
no.
yeah. Well, no, you'll probably be delighted to hear that. What we're doing with our businesses is we're trying to break that mold. So we're in a market that exactly you hit the nail on the head with. There's a lot of mom and pop shops out there, and they're progressing in retirement, and they're either folding or they're going into the market to be basically put into other facets or other your larger companies. Exactly. And in fact, that is one reason why I'm at where I am with our business, because I was very reluctant and was not willing to take our business in the hands of private equity for that matter. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to break that mold to where we can acquire and we can start to operate these businesses and invest in them with technology to be able to get the response times and get the accuracy of what we're building to the market quicker. So for instance, Mom and pop fabricators are everywhere. I do business with a lot of them. Some of them are great resources to me just because we've had a long relationship with them. We're gaining new suppliers almost daily where we're weeding out the ones that are good or the ones that are bad. But what we're trying to do is we look at our competition being, per se, the mom and pop threshold of business and saying, okay, if we consume these guys and we make them a part of our business, we can't just keep them as a mom and pop operation on the side, turning dollars and making some income. We've got to streamline all of our business units to perform at a level to where we can respond quickly. And that's where your AI, conversation comes into play, because specifically with estimating is a very difficult and laborious task, and especially in
A
the
lot of
metal
drudgery.
industry. Yeah. And there's very few days that go by where we don't have the conversation or we're looking at a product or a portal to put into our estimating systems that we're going to be able to basically take CAD data and dump it into it and get that function right off the gate. Now, outside of that, when you're putting parts on the floor, there's very few fabricators that are using offline programming. And I'm well aware of where the industry is going, or at least in my opinion. So what you're going to see is you're going to see machine manufacturers start to take over as a service for your programming. Literally, you're going to be buying services from your machine manufacturers and putting those on your floor and operating them to whatever scale you can based on whatever capital inputs you have to put into those. So that's the avenue that we're looking down, to be able to try to bridge that gap where we're not trying to form metal by pounding it over an anvil with a hammer. But in a sense, that's how a lot of the fabricators in the Midwest still operate.
That's the music to my ears. And I just have a emergency. I'm gonna have to go deal with a burst pipe.
You need a plumber. No, her and our family knows all about the need for plumbers.
Just shut off the main to the house. Actually,
that's my second.
That's our second profession in the Huncilman Riggs household. So
it's almost become a hobby.
You go deal with that. We will continue. I think, Parker, I want to kind of scratch the surface a little more on, something you were saying. I love the private equity piece as well. One thing you were saying there with the AI piece and the machines, I want to talk about what the machines are doing and give people a real visual illustration of what is really happening on the factory floor. And of course, people can go to huncilman.com and see graphic illustrations of laser cutting and precision forming and robotic welding, and they can't feel the heat of e-coating and painting, but they can maybe see graphically what it looks like. But can you share with us examples of what some of the products are that in the future you might get an order, or you'd be able to do AI pricing and do some kind of automated based design and things like that for, but at the end of the day, there is physical forming and there is machine-based services that have to be done in the factory. And so what do those physical products look like that come out of Huncilman and
Yeah, so the easiest way that I describe and I'll speak to Huncilman Sheet Metal Fabrication specifically on this, but the easiest way to describe it is if you were to walk in a big box store, Lowe's, Home Depot, and you're going to buy a sheet of plywood, it's going to come in a size 4x8 feet in width and length. We buy sheet in those sizes, which are different sizes, typically 6x12 or 4x8. And we cut those products. Sometimes we cut them, and that's the only function that goes into them or input. Typically, we try to obviously use all of our resources because you make more margin on the part if you utilize all your machinery. So we're cutting those parts with CNC lasers, fiber optic lasers, and then we're putting them through forming cells, which are called press brakes. We're using the press brakes to bend the componentry, and a lot of the times those components go into welding cells. We've got robotic welders as well as manual welding, and we formulate a part. So then the part is what somebody working in their garage wants to build something out of wood, we build it out of metal. And then what those parts do is we either e-coat them in-house, which is a primer coat, which is predominantly an automotive coating, and then we sell those parts to our customer that has designed the product for those to essentially bolt onto. So if you look at a lawnmower and you see all the bits and pieces bolted or welded together, those pieces are typically not made by the manufacturer. They're made by manufacturers like us as a second tier or third tier supplier. Essentially, parts and pieces made from a metal sheet is the core of our business.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So when
So
you go ahead.
no, it's fine.
Oh, I was going to say, I don't know if you were asking to say how the inputs of AI and the advancements in machinery can affect that. So a lot of the ideas of how we're going to modify what what we have now and what most of our competition does now is you have to look at it from a sell perspective. So we're trying to find business and bid business that's like kind, so repetitive. We're not a heavy stamper, so there's a threshold between press brake forming and heavy stamping. Heavy stamping is a high volume game, hundreds of thousands of parts annually. We're thousands of parts, but the machine market, we can find cell technologies where we're actually having robotic arms feed press brakes in repetition. So you can think down that path of advancements and so on and so forth. So repetition and cell type environments where they're materials coming from the laser to a cell department and it only has to get touched once versus 4 times and so on.
I've been talking with my architects and designers, my students in architecture and design, quite a bit about this. And on one hand, talking about this theme to build is to design, and how we need not just think about just producing beautiful designs, but actually designs that can be executed and built. But at the same time, what you're bringing up is that you're almost a Swiss Army knife of sorts. That you're not just doing one thing. You're doing architecture, fabrication, and you're basically doing a whole string of things in house. But I think what I'm also hearing is that you're doing a large degree of specialization as opposed to diversification. Am I hearing you right?
Yeah, to a degree. I would describe it as what we say is we're not responsible for the design of the part. When we bid a part, it fits our profile. So we don't do a lot of design engineering. Now what you're speaking to on the more the prototyping realm, we don't get into a tremendous amount of prototyping. In fact, we shy away from it. It's just that business model hasn't really been a road we've wanted to go down. Referenced earlier, a lot of that is, in the larger cities where, capital's being put towards developing those products. So, you can afford to build them, right? You can afford to fail. And, we're just not in the business to where we can prototype and afford to fail. Now, we do engineering, don't get me wrong. I mean, and a lot of times we'll get a design in and recommend engineering changes regularly, but we're not necessarily, or we don't consider ourselves at Huncilman Sheet Metal design fabricators.
Yeah, yeah. And that's cool. I mean, I think you've really found a niche with you mentioned, lawnmower parts, and I know you're working with many interestingly non-US automotive suppliers, which is it's really cool that you're able to. I think most people don't realize that you're able to supply parts. You're able to export parts outside of the US. So I think when we consider the fact that like you have a Midwestern, fifth generation factory that's actually able to supply parts for non-US OEMs, it's a really cool story to tell.
Yeah, I mean, just to give you some examples of that, we ship globally. The majority of the products that we ship internationally go to Mexico, some to Canada, Europeans, Italy, and Switzerland. We do send some componentry over there from time to time.
Yeah.
But every major automotive company, we're touching parts that are going into their assembly plants.
That's a really cool story. And one piece I wanted to talk, and I know we're taking parts of your Friday, and you have a family, so we want to be respectful of that, and really grateful for your time. Wanted to, you spent some time letting, you are situated in the Midwest, and labor is an issue. And I think labor is an issue nationwide, talent and labor. and finding qualified labor. And so I'm curious kind of how do you deal with retaining and attracting talent? What are your biggest challenges with kind of talent capital culture in the workplace? How do you deal with that as a leader, as a manager? And I'm curious, what are your biggest challenges there, and how do you overcome them?
So from a cultural standpoint, I've said this many times, when we decided to progress with the business, being my dad and my uncle who were active in it, retiring, we had a deficit in the culture realm. We just weren't doing a very good job of it. With doing what I did with the business, that was a huge portion of it. So the drive for Nick's Industrial, that portion of the business, is enormously driven towards finding talent. So we put a ton of resources into our human resources department. Vocationally, we're active with all the vocational programs in Southern Indiana, but we are definitely in a cycle of losing qualified operators. Cross training is a major thing that we've instituted at Huncilman Sheet Metal specifically. But I've seen a bit of a shift, which this is probably the most intriguing thing to me in the last 2 years. That I was thinking about this before we got on the call, but we're somewhere, I would say 15 to 20% of our staff is under the age of 25, which is unheard of in a sheet metal shop right now, and on the good side. Um, you know, we have 3 operators in our fab division right now that are under the age of 20, and they're extremely great team members. They take on to technology um, like nobody's business. So to me, that tells you, okay, that is a product in itself that you need to invest in, is automation and technology, because the younger generation just understands it. So the better the equipment gets to be able to facilitate the tech-driven individual, that's where you start to get your employment base from. So
That's
that's a
amazing.
critical part of investment.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. And you're at the same time you're investing in the culture and the future of your company at the same time. So, and I don't think it takes a Stanford degree to get that. You can invest
No,
in your
it
local
doesn't.
leaders.
But I mean, the biggest thing with culture is when you say you're going to do something, you better do it. Otherwise, culture will fall immediately. And the Knicks industrial portion of that, and the Knicks brothers, I mean, they're hell bent on culture. And if you don't fit, you won't make it. And so that's what we need, because that's the team aspect that a lot of fabricators don't have. They've got Joe and Jim that have been there for 35 years and are loyal to them, but they're not building a product with their business to allow people to want to work there. And that's our number one thing, is to try to be a leader in our industry where people are lining up at the door to come work for us. And so culture is a massive drive for us. And it's been difficult for me because I'm transforming a current workforce into that culture. I'm taking the good with the bad, because not everybody's going to want to transform into that. And we have had a share of turnover, but it's been on tremendously to the good side.
Yeah. That's really fascinating. And I mean, I think it sounds like it's an ongoing journey, but one that you have really good teammates in the Nix brothers with. So
Yep, I agree.
yeah, so I just wanted to ask you if I mean, I think we can kind of begin a wrap up, but do you have any final thoughts for folks who might be listening, maybe, sitting somewhere over, I know we have some folks listening in the Netherlands who are interested in kind of stuff happening scattered across the US about kind of where the next great manufacturing innovation might come from, any advice from middle America that you might have?
In my opinion, I think that we're going to see a substantial resurgence. And fabricated product, and I'll speak to manufacturing in general. I mean, we still have a large footprint in manufacturing. When you really sniff out how much stuff we make in America, it's nothing what it was, but it's still here. So if we continue to invest in that, we're going to see a resurgence. And I hope to tell them what you're going to see is in the coming years is that we have a higher demand for fabricated product. And again, speaking to us specifically, and we have a receding supply base. So the people that are successful with that are going to get good at it, and we're going to find our niche and we're going to continue on. I don't think we're in a cycle to where you're going to see a big pullback on American manufacturing. There's a lot of course, with the current administration of trying to do that, but I don't think that it's ever necessarily left to a massive degree. I've been in our business for 25 years and actively in management for over 15. I've seen offshoring and I've seen onshoring, and we were able to sustain growth throughout all of that. So, if we get good at it, which a lot of companies are doing this, and a lot of organizations are parking themselves right here in the Midwest. I'll speak to one development, River Ridge, where there's billions of dollars being invested with manufacturer, data centers, everything, and they're here for a reason. So you're going to see the Midwest, I think, personally, um, start to build upon what we really haven't lost entirely.
Well, you heard it, folks. Uh, Innovation isn't zip code dependent. The geography of innovation is becoming more diverse. Parker, it's been a joy being on site with you in the Midwest. Thanks for sharing everything that you do at Huncilman. Really appreciate it. And thanks to you and all the crew there at the factory. And thanks to everybody that's tuning in. Catch up with us next time.
Thanks for letting me join.
This has been Rewiring the American Edge, global conversations on innovation, automation, and the future of competitive cities. I'm Billy Riggs. Thanks for joining us. Our series is sponsored by the University of San Francisco Automation and Innovation Fund. If you're interested in supporting our students or work, reach out via email. Also, please connect with us on social media or LinkedIn. We would love to hear from you. Until then, all the best.